de la famille.
I'm very happy to be here. Today's topic is how to design your growth strategy. Basically, I've been at the family for a bit more than 3 years now, so I've seen a lot of startups coming by. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs do great things, stupid things, many things. And one question that comes back often is, do you have some tips and tricks to help us for growth? And every time I answer no, because I really don't. And what I want startups to do first is to know what they should focus on, because every startup is different. There are some patterns and there are some different types of startups. And so today I just want to walk you through the different types of startups and give you tools that can help you with growth on different stage. The first question you should ask is, do I have a strong product market fit or not? Product market fit is basically the inception of every startup. It's where the adventure starts. Who doesn't know what it is here? Maybe you can raise your hand, don't be shy. All right. So you all know. So very quickly, product market fit is: do people understand? Do people buy? And do people share what you do? It's a very important step because it completely changes the destiny of your startups, obviously. Who here is certain to have a product market fit? All right. Okay, congratulations. Well, it's hard to say because most people want a product market fit. They want to believe they have one, but very few actually do. The first thing you should work on, and some entrepreneurs have a hard time finding one, is a value proposition. What will make people buy your product or your service or what you do? It seems rather obvious like this, but it's always a bit hard for entrepreneurs to tell exactly what they're doing. You can think of this question in terms of what are you doing different or better than the others? What feature of your product is better than the others? This is the first thing that you must find because it's where everything starts, and this will help you advertise your product, this will help you find clients, and this will help you determine whether you have a product strategy. Product market fit, sorry. Second thing you should make sure to have is referral. Because product market fit is understanding and buying, but it's not enough. Great product, great startups all have some sort of viral effect when they start. And so what you should be looking for is this, referral. So this is the example of Slack. I think most of you know Slack, and maybe you have seen this growth curve. Basically, it's how you start at basically nothing and go to more than 2 million users in 6 months. This is due to referral. This is because when you install Slack, you are prompted with an invitation to invite all of your team. So if one person in the team invites all the others, who will invite in turn other people, etc., etc., the application will spread. And this kind of viral effect is what you're looking, because this is the biggest indicator of a product market fit. When you have this kind of curve, when you have this kind of growth curve, usually you can be almost sure that you're onto something interesting. The hard thing with this is that success is obvious, so you know when you have a product market fit, and if you're asking yourself the question, do I have one or don't I have one, chances are you don't. And it's okay, because it's not a bad thing. You can pivot, you can test other things, you can test other proposition, you can test other product, but you have to be radical about it. And if you're not feeling like your application is booming naturally, you certainly don't have a product market fit. So at this point, you must be thinking, okay, this guy is talking about product market fit, we're here for growth, what the fuck? And what I want to stress is, if you don't have a product market fit, growth hacking is useless. You won't be able to do any growth hacking thing if you don't have this product market fit, because it's here to supercharge an organic growth, but it's not here to create one. Growth hacking doesn't create unicorn. Growth hacking isn't magic. So you have to get something going. You have to get an application running. You have to get a service or something that is already existing and working. And growth hacking is how you can supercharge this. So first thing, make sure you have a product market fit. Second thing, know where you are in your process, in the life of your startups. This is a framework made by Brian Balfour, I think, who distinguishes 3 phases: traction, transition, and growth in your startup life. So you start with traction, then you transition to growth. And this integrates with the R framework. So who knows the R framework here? All right. So for those who don't, basically the AARR framework is a tool designed by Dave McClure, and it's all the steps a user takes to generate revenue in your business. So first you have to acquire the user, then you have to convert him or her. You have to make the user sign up. Then you have to retain the user. You have to make sure he uses the product frequently, maybe every day, maybe every week, but that he uses it on a regular basis. Then you have to make sure that he's so satisfied with the product and the experience is so great that he refers other people. And finally, this will generate revenue. That's basically how it works. And this is from a user's perspective, but it's not from an entrepreneur's perspective, because if you read this, you'd be tempted to say, okay, first I will work on my acquisition, then I will work on activation, then I will work on retention, etc. And the life of your startup isn't like that. You're not starting to spend 1 million in AdWords, see how it goes, and then try to make the highest converting web page, and then try to retain the user, etc. You can do that. So you have to start with the traction phase. It's the first step in your startup's life, and basically it's about finding first client manually and see whether you have a product market fit or not, and see how they behave. If I'm launching a new service, chances are I don't have a lot of money to start with. So try to find your first client in person. Let's say you're creating a great app for developers. Try to meet developers in person, make them install your app, and see if they are satisfied or not. One example of that is Stripe, so they work right here now. But when they started in the Valley, the Stripe CEO was installing Stripe on every app of every entrepreneur he met. Basically, their goal was to help entrepreneurs with online payments. So they would go to entrepreneurs, install them themselves, and make them use it by force. And if they kept it, it meant that Stripe was actually doing a good job. And actually, they are doing a good job because now they're international. But they started manually. And the way people react to your manual installation tells you a lot about whether they like your service or not. So start there, because confronting yourself to real users, to real life users, will help you collect insights about whether your product is good or not, what you could do better, etc. And it will provide you with some first feedbacks that help you improve your product later. Once you have this, once you have started manually and see that your product actually interests someone, you can go into the transition phase. Transition phase is just before you actually grow very fast. It's when you try to make your app a bit better. It concentrates on this section of the R framework: activation, retention, referral. It's basically the core engine of your growth. This is where everything happens. How do people convert on your landing page? Do they sign up for your service, for your app, for whatever you're doing? Do they download the app? Do you have high retention figures? So once they are signed up, do people come back? Do they like your product? And finally, referral, do they share? Because using an app is nice, but what the real magic happens is when people start sharing it, start talking about it with their friends, so them in turn will become users and will refer to other people, etc., etc. This is a loop, because when people come to your website, they're activated, they're retained, they share to other people who will be activated, retain, share, etc. So this is the first organic growth engine. It takes a lot of product development. It's basically it's UX, UI. How does your app looks? Does it work well? Is your service useful? Etc. So the reason why, for instance, Uber is very good at it, and the reason for that is because when you open the app, it's easy to sign up. It's easy to use. It works well. When you order a cab, it comes in and there's no trouble. And they provided you with an incentive to share, because if you refer a friend, you earn 10 euros or 20 euros, I don't remember. And this makes people sign up, use, share, etc. So this is what you want to do when you have your product market fit, is focus on this to make sure that your product actually works in a marketing way. It's not about making your product perfect. It's not about not doing acquisition anymore, not spending time on getting new users. It's really about focusing on the fact that users use your product and share it. And when you have that, you can enter the growth phase, which is back to acquisition, and it's about finding a sustainable acquisition channel and profitable acquisition channel. Basically, when you have that transition, you can start raising funds because you have first figure that will help you spend it in acquisition. That's how many startups work. And there you can experiment around advertising, around new techniques of growth, around giving coupons code to refer people, etc. And this is where you can really start having a thinking in terms of, all right, this user brings in 100 euros, I can spend 20 euros to acquire him, and I will make 80 euros profit. So basically, you're trying to get the acquisition cost under the value generated by the user. These are the three phases: traction, transition, growth. Now, who's at the traction phase right now? Okay, transition, growth. Okay. So basically, you know where you are, and it's a first way to see pattern emerges in startups. The second way to classify startups is whether you're a community business or an intent-based business. So what I mean, community business is about it's business about user engagement and creating a habit. For instance, let's take an example in the family's portfolio. We have a startup called Money Next Door. They operate in Belgium, and what they let you do is order food from your neighbors. So you can buy foods from your neighbors, eat it at home, etc. So it's a bit like a restaurant, except your chef is your neighbor. This is the quintessential community business, because what matters is that a Menu Next Door user comes back often. Maybe that he orders twice a week. And this is the key metric. This is what they are measuring, engagement and retention. Because what they want is users to come back often so they can generate a steady stream of revenue and make sure that they like the service, that it works well, that they eat great food, discover great neighbors, etc. So the key point of Menu Next Door is increasing this user retention, by sending them email to re-engage them, by creating events so they can discover new neighbors, etc., etc. On the other hand, the intent business is not so much about retention, but on finding the right people at the right time. Another the family startup, it's called Trusk. It lets you move things from anywhere to anywhere. I think it's a bit like Move24 here in Germany. And what they need to find is people who are in the need of moving things from point A to point B. You don't move heavy things every day, thankfully. And what they need is to, but everyone needs to move something at one point in his or her life. So what they need is to find their user at the right time. It's mainly about acquisition. And so the key metric is making sure that the acquisition cost is under the lifetime value of the customer. Meaning that if they earn, I don't know, let's say 20 euros per charge, per new customer, they must find one for less than that. And so it's really a moment business. What you want is to be in the right moment and finding the customer at the right time. And finally, there are some hybrid businesses like SaaS model, where you both need to find users at a reasonable acquisition cost, but also need to monitor the churn rate, meaning that you need to make sure that people stay on the service and use it on a regular basis. But basically, keep in mind the key metrics for each. Community businesses, it's about retention. Intent businesses, it's about acquisition cost. And SaaS models, it's about the churn rate and acquisition cost. Meaning that you try to really get users for as cheap as possible, and making sure that they don't unsubscribe. So now, what tools can you use to get there? That's the interesting part. Basically, what I'm going to tell you here are a few strategies that I've seen working at the family. It's not the only ones. There are many, many other strategies. But it's something that can help you get started and that can help you go fast. First thing is building your expertise, meaning content marketing. So content marketing is a very trendy thing. Then you'll find plenty of resources on the internet about how to do it and how to use it. And it's a bit hard to see where's the bullshit and where's the actual value in all the advice you can find online. But basically, keep in mind that creating content can be used for many things. First, it's useful to show some expertise on one subject. So for instance, if you're doing a wedding app, you can write plenty of tips to organize your wedding. And it can be reused for many other services. Like, for instance, you can reuse your content for SEO because you will have a lot of content. Google will index it and will make your website rank higher on this particular topic. You can use content marketing to advertise it to people. Rather than advertising your product directly, you can make them discover you with content marketing, with some content. See, okay, what they write is cool, let's check their app. So you can have this kind of strategies. The problem with content marketing is it takes a lot of time. Writing an article takes some time. So you have some great resources to help you with that on the internet. For instance, the website Text Broker helps you find freelancers that can write an article, so you can send them a few bullet points and they turn it into a 1,000 word article. Let's say it costs you $50 per article for the good ones. It's not that expensive, it saves you a lot of time and can help you go faster. Also remember that content is mainly about distribution. Writing content is not that matters much. It's about distributing it and making sure that people will read it or watch it, etc. So you have to get into some strategies to distribute it. First, by email, social networks. You have to make sure that all of this works, and we'll dig into other tips to spread it on many channels. If you want some inspiration about content, things that work well, how to distribute, how to write it, go on the website Copy Hackers. It's basically the specialty, and they have a lot of resources about this. I mean, you can spend certainly weeks reading all the websites, so use the search field to browse what really interests you. It's a gold mine, so you can really find lots of inspiration on Copy Hackers. When you start, you will have to do things manually, and you can do a lot without coding or without developing new features of your product. You can basically collect any user input with Typeform. You can use Zapier to plug different web services together. All of this can give you a lot of freedom to create new hacks or new things that are easy to develop. For instance, with Zapier, you can connect two web services together. So let's say I have, I don't know, a Typeform with some entries. So let's say I collect user input. I can plug it to Zapier, choose my account, pick my form. All right, continue. And so I can collect all the data with the Typeform, so I don't have to code, I just have to set it up online. Zapier will monitor new entries. Then I can apply some code to, for example, to sort the data, to treat it. So it's a bit of JavaScript. So let's say I have a string that I want to explode in an array. So very simply, I can get this string of emails and write some JavaScript code to separate the emails. You have a lot of documentation to do that online. And if you don't code, you can use Zapier without coding. It's just something more. And for instance, then I can put this email into a Google spreadsheet. And this Google spreadsheet will give you a list of emails. And for instance, I could imagine that I have this Typeform that collects referral from my users, so they can refer some emails. I separate the emails, put it in a spreadsheet, and send a referral email every 10 days or every 2 days to make them discover my service. So Zapier can help you prototype experiments very quickly like this. So if you have an idea, you can test it with Zapier and then implement it later in your product. So you should be able to go rather quickly with it. All right. Now, the truth about when you start is that emails are your best friends, and you will need to work a lot around emails for many things. First, because it's a great tool to retain your users. Re-engagement emails are well known. You can send emails about, hey, it's been a long time you haven't ordered on Menu Next Door. Why don't you discover these 3 chefs that are cooking tonight? You'll have, I don't know, sushis and burgers and something else. And if you want, you can find them in less than 5 minutes away from your home, etc. So emails and re-engagement is one of the most easy thing to do that most startups don't dare doing, and this is something you should absolutely do if you want to re-engage your users. Now, emails is also a great way to acquire new users. For instance, especially if you're doing some B2B apps or things like that, you can scrap website to extract the data. So some website expose the emails of your target. It depends of your target, but obviously you can find some emails online, and you can extract that data with tools like Data Miner. Data Miner, I have an example about it. So for instance, sorry, yeah, it's gonna work, okay. Data Miner is a tool for Google Chrome. So basically when you browse a website, you can scrap data and extract data out of it. So let's say, for instance, I'm building an app to find plumbers, and I need to have as many plumbers referenced on my app. So in France, we have a website called The Page Jaune, which lets you find this kind of business. So I'm looking for plumbers, and I see that I have a lot of addresses I can put on my website. So how am I going to extract it? Well, first I inspect the element. I try to find the HTML classes of the element. So for instance, it supports the class address, which is cool. And with Data Miner, I'm going to extract all the elements that have this class in the web page. So the plugin opens this window. They have a lot of reference for using the XPath, which basically helps you target some elements in your web page. So here I extract all the A elements that have the class address, and I extract the text they contain, And here it builds me a list of all the addresses I have on the page. You could do the same for phone numbers. You could do the same for email addresses if the page have email addresses. And you can download it in CSV. The goal of this workshop is not to help you use data miner, but you can do a lot of things with it, and we could spend hours building things with it. Basically, they have a great help online, so if you want to use it, read the documentation. It's very well made and it's very easy to use. And so you can extract a lot of data from websites. One very basic hack is to use LinkedIn as sort of a lead generation machine. So let's say you want to scrap all of the employees of one company. You just go to the company page on LinkedIn. You click on See All Employees, and Data Miner has some recipes already built in. And so you can use a LinkedIn recipe to extract all the profile URLs, name, first name, and job title of people matching your search. And if you go on a website like Upwork or freelancer.com, you can find freelancers that will match this profile URL with an email, and you will pay something like 20 cents for every email you get. It's not that expensive. It's probably the same price as a click on your website on Facebook, except that this time you have their emails directly. So you can re-engage them. You can put them in a drip email campaign. So for those who don't know, drip emails is the fact that you send an email, and depending on the behavior of the person who receives the emails, you decide to send a second email and a third, fourth, etc. So for instance, you can send out an email making them discover your service. If they don't open it, you try to send the exact same email with a different subject. If they open it but don't answer, you send a follow-up email 2 days later. And if they answer, you take on the conversation manually. One tool to do that is Autopilot. So if you type Autopilot HQ in Google, you'll find them. It's a bit expensive, but it's a very easy to use solution to do just that. And so you can put leads in it and interact like that. Alternatively, if you use Gmail, you can use the Mixmax plugin, which is also great. Hugo here and Mathieu are big fans of this, and so when we don't answer their emails, they follow up every day until we answer. But it's definitely a great strategy if you want to close a deal, if you want to make a sale. One tool I like is Kickoff Labs. So it's not about acquisition, this is more about activation. Who knows the Robinhood app here? Okay. Kickoff Labs got famous with the Robinhood app. It's an iPhone app that lets you trade free of charge. And basically they did something very clever. They had this kind of homepage, and the app wasn't ready yet. So for all of you those of you who haven't launched yet, you can use this kind of service where you said, okay, this is our value proposition. We're launching in 3 months. Subscribe to make sure you're the first to get it. So this is what they did. The world's $0 commission stock brokerage stopped paying $10 for every trade. And if you entered your email address, you'd have an early access. But just after that, you'd have a thank you page that's okay, thank you for your sign up. Now, if you want to be the first users of the app, if you want to be among the first one to have access to the beta, you have to recommend 3 people, and when 3 people signed up, you would be on the beta list. And this kind of viral loop makes people recommend to many, many other people. And this way they grew, and I think they launched with several thousand signups. And they would also re-engage you via email to make sure you'd refer them. So this kind of viral loop, you can build that with Kickoff Labs. It's a tool to do exactly that. I think Mathieu will post the slide in the meetup. So I put a link about a tool, about a blog post they made that help you use their tool. But same thing, once again, if you want to launch a feature, if you want to launch a new product, it's easy to do. It takes less than 2 hours to set up, and you can test things very rapidly. And this way you can experiment and you can discover new things. About conversion, about activation, one thing you might look into is Crisp. It's a chat like that at the bottom of the page. Might look a bit stupid to say this, but it actually changes things. Always have a chat on your website, especially if you're early stage, because you want to chat with people who are coming in. And you want to chat with your users to understand what they're looking for, why they're here, what they like in your product, etc. Crisp also lets you open a chat pop-up based on the behavior of your users. So for instance, if he spends more than 2 minutes on the purchase page, you could open a chat saying, hey, how I can help you, or here's a coupon code to help you make your purchase, I don't know. But you can find this kind of behaviors interesting to test, just to make your website convert better. And finally, I left it for the end of the tool. You have to collect a lot of data to improve your growth and to find what you should do and in what direction you should develop your product. And just keep in mind that if you don't collect data, if you don't have data, you can have knowledge about your product and you can't understand what your users like in your product, in your service, and how you can improve. So it's very important to have data. The first basic service, and I guess most of you have already put it, is Google Analytics. Now you can complement it with tools like Mixpanel or Amplitude that let you track users. So for instance, you can, in your code, send events that are recorded by these services, and they can provide you with easier to use and sometimes more comprehensive analytics than just Google Analytics. Just, I don't know. So I don't know if some of you have already this kind of chart, and if you're monitoring it. This is a funnel basically. So it's all the steps of your user. So for instance, here I've got a website that lets you download a document. To download the document, you have to enter an email address. So I have here the number of users who view the page, the number of users who click the button and see the pop-up to enter their email, the number of emails submitted, and the number of documents that have been downloaded. And this way I can see the conversion rate, and I see that I have a 60% drop between people who are asked their email and people who actually enter it. So maybe if I change my pop-up, if I improve it in some way, if I add some text to make sure that I won't spam them or something else, I can have this kind of I can improve this conversion rate, and this kind of view helps me find where I should improve my product, because you can have a way more complicated views than that with more steps and see where the drops are and where you should work first. For every campaign you do, make sure that you track them. So make sure you have some UTMs. Who doesn't know what it is here? You all know what UTMs are? No? Okay. So very quickly, it's sort of get variables that you give to Google Analytics to indicate where your traffic is coming from. So for instance, here I advertise the family.co website. So I put my website address. I've put the link to do this on the bottom of the slide. I say that my traffic source is Facebook. So for instance, I'm doing a Facebook ad. I pay by CPC and I name my campaign. I say this is my campaign from June 2016. And this will give me this kind of URL here that I can put in my Facebook ad. So in place of just my URL, I add some variables. So all the traffic that come from here will be indicated in Google Analytics, and I can sort the traffic. So I can say I want only the traffic coming from this campaign, And this way I can analyze the results of my campaign and how, if it performed well, bad, what the users did, etc. Second thing you should do, set up goals in Google Analytics. So it's very important that your website has a goal, usually to make people sign up, buy whatever. And it's important to set it up in Google Analytics. So once again, I'll send you the slides, and there are resources that are more exhaustive than that on the internet. But what you should keep in mind is you can track goals in Google Analytics. You can say, I want my users to visit my thank you page that happens after the purchase. And so you can say, all right, I want the number of people who came to my homepage, the number of people who came to my product page, the number of people who came to my purchase page, and the number of people who came to my thank you page. And then you have this kind of view where you can see all your goals here in the, I'm sorry, it's a bit long. Here you can see all your goals. You can see the number of goal completion and where the traffic is coming from. So for instance, I see that my referral on Facebook brought me 4% of goal completion. What's more, in Google Analytics, you can build funnels like this. So it's on the left in funnels visualization. And this is once again a very simple one, but you can have a more complicated one. And you can see how people behaved before completing the goal. For instance, here I've got a 3.8 conversion on this page. Finally, on Google Analytics, you can attribute the traffic. And this is maybe a more tricky part. So it's in the model comparison. It's at the bottom of the left column on Google Analytics. Attribution is your decision, because what happens usually is that a user will come through, let's say, Facebook ad, then will come back by an email campaign, and finally will search your website on Google and make the purchase after this search. Where do you attribute the purchase? Do you think that he purchased because he saw your ad, because he saw your email, or because he searched on Google? There's no good answer, but basically when you do an ad, usually people see the ad and don't convert immediately. So you might be interested in this, the model comparison, where you can attribute the completion of goals to the last interaction or first interaction, and where you can choose whether you say that this goal has been completed because of the ad or because of the Google search. So once again, you have to learn how to work with Google Analytics. These are the 4 main things to monitor: making sure you have UTMs, making sure you have goals, making sure you have funnels, and making sure you track which source you attribute the conversion to. Because this will help you gather knowledge on how efficient are your acquisition channels, and whether ads is more efficient than emailing, or whether referral is more efficient than ads. And it must be very clear to you what channel works best. Now, this is to measure acquisition. How do you measure retention? You measure retention with a tool called cohorts. Basically, it looks like this. You can have it in Mixpanel. Mixpanel is really, really good for cohorts. It has this kind of visualization. The way it works is you have the last, say, 10 weeks listed on the left. And if I take this number, what it means is that from all the users who signed up on March the 3rd, 5 weeks later, I have only 7% of the users who came back. This kind of stat is useful to measure how often people come back on your website. And you can measure this weekly, monthly. The weekly is a great unit of measure because it's fairly fast and it's homogeneous, so it's easier to use. But basically, you should have a tool like this if you're a retention business, because this will help you determine how often people use your product, and so you should be looking at it frequently to make sure if you have a good retention figure, bad retention figure, etc. Finally, last analytic tool that I like is Hotjar. Who knows Hotjar here? Okay. It's less well known than the other two, but basically it lets you do heat maps like this on your website to see where people click, which is not the most interesting about Hotjar. What Hotjar do is it's just a code, a JavaScript code that you copy paste on your page, and it lets you record what the user does. So you can see the user scroll the page, click on the buttons, and move to another page, read that, click on the purchase buttons, and go back, etc. If you are listed, it's very interesting to look at this screen recording because you can see some patterns emerge, and you can see where users are like, I don't like it, I'm going to go back. And for instance, I did that with a startup yesterday, and we saw that they read the page thoroughly, and then they arrive at the pricing matrix, and they immediately quit. It's often the case, but every user quit at the pricing matrix. Maybe because the pricing matrix is not right and the service is way too expensive, or they don't offer the right features in their pricing matrix. I don't know, but this helps you indicate where you should work on. And once again, what you want is tools to prioritize what you're doing. Finally, this gives you this sort of dashboard. I put the link once again, so feel free to make a copy in your Google Drive if you want to use it. This is a very simple dashboard to track how your company, how your startup is doing. Basically, the way it works is you have one weekly KPI. So for instance, for community business, it will be a number of people who purchased every week. If you have intent businesses, it will be number of new clients, etc. And that's one weekly KPI of your business. So every business is specific. If you want, we can discuss it after the slides. So one weekly KPI that you measure every week, and that is not cumulated, which means, for instance, if I had 10 clients on week 1 and 20 on week 2, I will put 10, then 20, not then 10, then 13, etc. You don't cumulate the number. It's absolute number. And there are two other tables that might be interesting if you want some data. It's not something that you should track every week because it's a bit complicated and might not be very interesting to track it every week. But basically, there's the R framework that I discussed before with all the steps. So for instance, number of people who see your homepage, number of people who sign up, number of people who repurchase, number of people who refer, and number of people who bring in revenue. And this can give you a quick view of where you have drop-offs and where people leave your service. For instance, you can see very high acquisition, very high activation figures, but very low retention, which means that a lot of people sign up but don't really use your app thereafter. Why? I don't know. You have to dig into it. But it's useful to have an overview of this to see where you're doing bad, where you're doing good. And finally, the last table is an acquisition breakdown, which means it's something very simple. You list all the channels of acquisition you have. For instance, email, Facebook ads, I don't know, flyers in the street, and referral. You see the number of people it brings in, the conversion rate of each channel, which means, for instance, if 10,000 people saw my ads, but only 1,000 signed up, I have a 10% conversion rate, and the cost per user it brings in. And this way you can have an overview of which channel is important for you, which isn't, and which channel is cheap, which channel is expensive. And so you can make decisions on whether I work on this channel or this channel very quickly. So it's important to have these kind of things in your head just so that you can discuss with others, and so you can focus your effort on the right parts of your product or your growth strategy. What you have to remember is first, always be fast. Experiment very quickly. These are some tools. There are thousands of other tools available, but they should help you experiment very quickly. Meaning that you can test if you have a new idea, if you have a new idea of an acquisition channel, if you have a new idea of feature, if you have a new idea of landing page. You should be able to do this very quickly, see how it goes, and improve. One company that has this mentality of move fast and break things and we just move forward is Facebook. Always remember that Facebook started here, look at what they are today, and they did it by always improving very, very quickly. And the great thing with this is you shouldn't start with a perfect product. You should start with a product that improves very fast. Second thing to remember is you should be radical, because when you are testing things, always, if you have a doubt, you can test version A, version B, do an A/B testing. And you can test two very radical versions of your hesitation, and it will be a clear indication of where the winner is. I see a lot of startups who test, for instance, two value propositions where there's just one word that changes. It's nice, but it's not your job. Your job is to test two value propositions that are totally different. For instance, you could test two different targets, you could test two different features of your product, but you should test things that are very different to know where you should be going. Airbnb is a startup that can be picky and choose to test one word in their value proposition or one word in their landing page, or whether they should be pink or a bit more red or something like that. Because they have a lot of traffic and they can test micro differences. But if you don't have the traffic of Airbnb, don't bother. Test radical things to know where you're going, and always make sure to be very radical about it. And so finally, to sum up, there's a lot of text, so sorry for these slides. Once again, we will send it to you. You can read it at home extra. But basically, when you want to set up a growth strategy and know where you should be going, always mind where you are in your startup. Traction, transition, growth. Is your startup very huge, very small? If you're just getting started, if you already here for three years. And also look at if you're a community-based startup, where the community is the most important asset, meaning that it's really about people who use your app very frequently, maybe once a day, maybe twice a week, but something where people should come back often. And what matters is how happy this community is, and can you bring more people in this community and make them happy? Or if you are an intense startup, or it's essentially a marketing thing, and meaning that you must acquire users very quickly at a reasonable cost. And your asset is your marketing channel. Or if you are an hybrid, like a SaaS product, where you should mind your acquisition channel and whether people churn or not. So always start here, see where you are, and depending on that, choose what is your focus. And choose what is your focus. And once you have chosen your focus, make sure you have the right tracking tools on your website and do experiments very quickly to find new levers of growth. That's basically how you should be proceeding. All right. Thank you for listening to me. Now what I suggest is that you ask some questions and I try to answer them. So if you have some questions, feel free.
You mentioned Crisp. How would you compare them with like Intercom?
That's a good question. No, it's a discussion we have. Crisp is a startup from the family, and so it's a whole discussion. Frankly, the product you'll see is a bit different. They're really focused on the chat. So you can ask this to them; they will answer far better than me. But basically, it's really focused on the chat and acquisition, whereas Intercom has also some tracking tools that help you with retention. So it's a bit different in the in where you want to use them.
Right.
Now
so
for the chat part, I think they're a bit better. They have more options. You can make the chat pop up at the right time and start a conversation whenever you want. Intercom is a tool that's perfectly fine too. So it's up to you. Lots of the tools I mentioned, there are lots of alternatives, and it's just my personal preferences, but it's perfectly okay if you have yours. I mean, there are lots of different tools to that.
I had another question, sorry, about email. So how do you prevent becoming listed on a spam list or blocked?
Yeah. So what you mean when you scrap emails and send them in a gray zone?
I mean, this is a little bit.
Yeah. It's totally in the gray zone, and it's okay. And it's going to be video recorded, so I have a lot of insults after that, but that's okay. The thing is, first you should target your users, meaning that if you're selling a product for developers and you take everyone who works at Adobe, for instance, you will be spammy because some people who work at Adobe are not developers, you know. So you have to target only people who are developers, so you can filter on skills on LinkedIn or on job titles or whatever. But first targeting to make sure that your product is relevant to the people you're spamming. Second is always make it from a different domain than your main company. So basically you create a shadow company that can have the same name and that makes all the advertisement. At the family, we sold an education program called Coup d'Etat. And so it was a different name than the family. And basically the way we did it is we scrapped all emails of the big consulting agencies, etc. in Paris. We just created huge databases and we sent emails. We did that once, 2, 3, maybe more. We did this 4 times, I think. And at the 4th time, the domain we used started to drop in the spam folder. And that was okay because we used a different domain. And we put a lot of focus on using a different domain that's the family domain. And this way you can sort of use different shadow companies to make sure that yours doesn't get in the spam folder.
Thank you.
What was the company called that you get the emails from?
The company we get the email from? Yeah. For Coup d'Etat?
Yeah, for the email.
We scrapped them on LinkedIn. Basically, we use the LinkedIn profile. First, we use the...
Before you said you can buy an email for 20 cents.
Oh, you can find freelancers on Upwork and freelancer.com very easily, where you send them LinkedIn profiles and they give you email addresses. The easiest way, but it's way more expensive than that, is to use prospect.io, which is a Chrome extension that you put in your Chrome browser, and it just extracts the emails from the Chrome browsers.
C'est fini? Applaus.
All right.
Que l'enfant